Hello, welcome back to Stage 1. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to move on to our next program. It's an AFM class called How to Budget a Film. It's my pleasure to introduce our instructor, Michael Mandaville. Michael has worked for 25 years as a producer, line producer, and UPM. Films he's worked on include Above Suspicion, Havoc, and the Taken series, among many, many others. Please help me in welcoming Michael Mandaville.
Well, I think we got it here in the terms of technology, so hopefully everybody can see me right about now. I am just going to bring up the presentation that I was working on and see if we can get started right here. So first of all, I wanted to make sure to thank Karen, Rachel, and the American film market for this opportunity. I hope everybody gets something out of it. I have originally I had about 132 slides, I think, but I don't think we'd cover much ground that way thoughtfully. So, and I didn't want Karen hitting me with her keyboard on my porch. So I am actually going to cut those down to about 42. After the class here, I will have a Q&A networking 8th floor. And since we have 60 minutes only, I think it's better if I take questions there so I can give you guys as much information as possible in our abbreviated time, okay? So we're doing how to schedule and budget your movie, and to some extent, it's going to be obviously impossible for me to explain the entire process to you in 1 hour. So therefore, what I'm really looking at here is the element where we're going to schedule your movie, but with specific techniques about scheduling and budgeting that you can use. Now, my assumption is that you're a writer, producer, one or the other, or both, and you would like to be able to interface with the assistant director, the UPM, and the process when you first start to get your schedule and budget together to ask better questions and to be better prepared. So that's the focus that I'm really going to take here a great deal. You want to guide your project to profitable targets. And one part of that is also to ask these better questions of the line producer, UPM, and first AD. So you have to get your arms around the fact that, like any new way of thinking, that it's 80% psychology and 20% mechanics here. So you need to shift your thinking a little bit, how you think about your script. And we'll get into that too. Not all that tough, but it's a distinct way of thinking about it. So like anything here in Hollywood, of course, it's all about me. So I'm going to talk about me for a split second here. Not too much. You've probably already read about me. That being said, up here, I've done writing and novels. I've directed very modest budget features, and I'm a line producer on various projects here, as Karen enumerated, member of the Guilds, Producers Guild, Directors Guild. But what's interesting is the writing that I've done, both novels and something like 50, some 60 scripts, at 14 optioned, and novels. I've written novels up on Amazon, and directing. What it does is it gave me a sense of this outlook. And when I talk about you shifting your psychology, more than likely, unless you're a studio and you have unlimited amounts of money, you are going to be filmmaking with a calculator. And so therefore, the more details you know, the fewer compromises you make, or you'll make willing compromises because someone's giving you $1 million for your film, or $500,000, or 5, or 10, whatever the number is. Eventually you're going to have to reconcile the schedule, the budget, and the creative. So I call this filmmaking with a calculator. So that's kind of the overall umbrella mentality that I really want to work with here. So I've done this with approximately 25 plus films. And what that essentially means is somebody's given me a script, and this happened last year. The script itself was 15 million. It needed to be made, or it could only be made for 13.5 million. So I went through the script and recommended a great many, not even cuts, but changes, and I was reconciling the script with the budget as I went. So because I know the budgeting process and the writing process, I could see where the money is going to go and make these changes that they wanted to do. So that way it can make the film possible and potentially get it made. So one thing is we're at the American film market, and there's a global competitive market here. So you want to get star value, but less cost, technical proficiency. You want to make sure you have great moments, and it should be sellable. The other flip side of that coin is the lowest price you can get, but you want to maximize your value, use your incentives. You want to schedule, I call it major minor time, where you have major actors and minimize their time. Advantage in union agreements, that definitely would be an entire seminar of a full day in and of itself in the US, absolutely. And locations too. So this is the system that I call filmmaking with a calculator. So when you actually want to embrace a technique or a new way of thinking, the best thing you can do is give it a name and a process. And that's why I call it filmmaking with a calculator. So we're going to go through various techniques here that we can talk about. First is to wear two hats. So whenever I'm given a script, I actually have to put on my logistical hat when I do a breakdown. There's actually a very good sign of the project when I start breaking down the script, but then I start reading it creatively and enjoying it. Going, well, that was a nifty turn in the plot, etc. And then I have to bring myself back into actually looking at the logistics of the project. That's actually a good sign. But as long as I've been doing this, I have to wear one hat or the other when I'm working on it. And I've told producers to do this, especially if you're new. When you have a script you're going to make two copies of the script, physical copies of the script. You have your creative one, you have your practical one. And the reason for this is you have two different mentalities. And it's I note here this mental shift, because what happens is if you are actually writing a novel or a script, you should never write in your bedroom where you go to sleep. If you are in an apartment, you should write in the kitchen, because when you go into the kitchen, your mind says time to get to work. When you go into the bedroom, you go time to go to sleep. So these are different mentalities. When you have two scripts, two folders, you pick up the creative one, you'll note things about casting, character arcs, and that. When you pick up the other one in the black folder, let's say, you're going to really be thinking about logistical notes and concerns, and you will start to build up those respective attributes of your project, the creative side and the practical side. Don't mesh them together. That's a much smarter way to do it. So I just call that, and I tell people the other part is by actually doing the writing on the project, you're going to get it in your brain what you're thinking better than if you look at it on a screen. So if this project matters to you, you want fluency in your brain about your own project. Developing that logistical fluency is really, really important. Okay. So the first thing you want to do, one of the techniques, is make a list of written assumptions about your project. And some of these can be obvious. If you are shooting a script set in France and you have certain monuments you have to go to, the Loire Valley and the Chateau, etc., well, it's highly probable you are going to shoot in France, or at least part of it. So you could start to make some notes there. It could be ones that you have an actor for 4 weeks, a prominent actor for only 4 weeks. There's an assumption that you're going to make. That you're going to have partners that might be other distribution companies in, let's say, Germany, France, the UK, and Canada. So you are going to have to accommodate those producers as well. Weather concerns. Incentives, very important these days, and used a great deal as far as financing. For people who are not sure of what incentives are, essentially you go and shoot in a locale, which could be Australia, Romania, Morocco has an incentive. I've talked to actually a friend of mine's there, and we're working to put together a movie in Morocco. And Atlanta, Canada, etc. So you can actually go to Entertainment Partners and look up production incentives, ep.com, and you can track it down and it'll find incentives. Fiji, a friend of mine just told me about Fiji having an incentive, a very good one. Canary Islands. So that's another consideration for you as far as for the part of the puzzle you need for your financing. So start with a list of those. Now, if you don't write it down and share it with everybody you're working with, you're going to be in trouble. You want to start with everybody on that page. Here's a list of assumptions. Do you have anything to add, or do you disagree with me on the assumptions I'm making? If so, let me know. So if you have partners, literally put everybody on that page and update it regularly. This way you are building your team, because I've seen too many movies really fall apart when everybody starts going down the road and assumptions were very different, including how much money one anticipates making from the project. That's another assumption one should get on the same page with. So when you are actually doing your logistical script, you're wearing that hat right now. Ask yourself this. You think, well, I am going to meet somebody for lunch, but they don't tell me the time, the place, who I'm going to meet, or what it's going to cost. Well, you're kind of in a lot of trouble. You can't really get to that destination. You can't make a movie for the amount of money unless you start really honing in on that target. So when you have your script number 2, the logistical script, what you're going to do is start considering these, because you're going to start to develop a target early about the cost for your film. And that may change, but you need to start thinking about what are the actuals. Now, this is before you get a schedule and budget, but it's your homework to do. So this is what I call the film project questionnaire. Now, I think what I can do here is, let's see, whoops, I have to go back. So in this film project questionnaire, I'm moving the mouse here so you can see it. But essentially, I send this out to producers, and I ask them, and it's kind of filled out right now. But I ask them, so how many executive producers do you have? How many producers, co-producers, associate producers? I think I counted one film had 37 producers on it not too long ago. But you also have the line producer, script, development cost, etc. Now, the point is, though, is I'm sending this out early so people start to answer my questions, because inevitably someone says to me, or I had it happen too much, like, and 20 years ago, I started just handing this out. They'll pick an arbitrary number going, we can make this movie for $7 million, or in this case, 6.5. But then they start throwing out a lot of other numbers. Well, we have the financing charge. We have a great many other charges. We're going to put in $500,000 for music, because 6.5 million sounds like you have a lot of money, but it goes very, very quickly. So when I put together this, you'll notice that the part left out is the production area. That's the part that's really going to get more definition in the schedule and budget process. But I have the above the line, which are producer, writer, director, etc., talent. And then I skipped production. I went to post-production, other, financing, finder's fees, special distribution, publicity, and then the contractual charges, completion bond, insurance, and the completion bond contingency. Right here it should say contingencies. That's typo on my part, but that would be the contingency on the bottom. So at the end of the day, when you actually add up all these numbers, and again, this is just an estimate, I'm at $4,050,500 minus my target. That means I actually have to make the film for $2,449,500. Now, that's an estimate. I could actually put this together and go, wow, that's a little too costly in all these other areas. So I have to start shaving some of these elements. Maybe make this actor here from Schedule F, which is 60. I have 65 in there, so then, because it actually holds other costs as well. But I may take those and make them weekly players, etc., until I get some kind of sense of proportionality. Now, this is not something, when you go here, it's not something you have to be 100% on. It's ongoing. But it does help you really think through your shopping list to do some real math. And the problem is a lot of people throw out figures and they've never done the real math and they don't think about it. If you want a copy of this, you could find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I could get a copy to you on either PDF or Excel. Okay, help you learn, and we'll explain some more of that too. So when you start to look at it, the things that people do leave out a great deal are finance fees, producer allotments, the bond, the insurance, and nowadays these protocols, which is another whole issue about making your film. And that's something that's challenging to account for. And again, that would almost make another seminar as well. But you could see that, and just putting in these numbers and getting a sense of the territory, you're trying to create a landscape for you of understanding for yourself. And again, it's psychological as well as the mechanics. So once we've gotten this material here and we got some sense of it, I would jump into the scheduling part. Okay, so let's see, I'm trying to be cognizant of my time here. So once you have your logistical script, what you're going to do is become conversant with your script, some degree of logistical fluency. And you could do this in a couple ways. You could have a very good read of the script. By and large, though, if you really want to get versed in your own material, is to do a mini breakdown. Now, you could do this on Excel, and you want to break down some key elements of your script. Now, remember, you're turning the page, and you're going to look at various elements of it. So one is the locations. And one of those questions I would ask is, when you start to look at the locations here, well, if you have a project and you are going to be at the apartment, the store, and the beach house, that's your project is set in, I'll say, Laguna Beach here in Southern California, you can actually count up the number of locations, and you find out, wow, I'm going to shoot 30 pages at the house, 25 at the store, and 22 at the beach house. So now in your mind, you now have a group of locations when you start to do a schedule. And you say, well, the lead actor's wife is only at the home and the store. So if I want to get a prominent actress, then I put those two together, and she could be in filming for 3-4 weeks and then gone from the project. But now you start to think logistically, how am I grouping things together to maximize my value? Because if you're paying $100,000 a week for an actress, and she matters in terms of international sales, you could say, well, $100,000 a week, 4 weeks, $400,000. Now I kind of got a feel for that. And of course, if the sales are generating much more because you've been thrifty in regards to that schedule, you're starting to solve problems. So this is a key element, because your problem solving happens in a lot of the pre-scheduled world. So that's one example of using locations. Now, again, if you just do an Excel spreadsheet, make it easy on yourself to undertake this. The other is going to be the page count, what we talked about just a moment ago, house, store, and beach house. Pages are counted in eighths of pages. So one page equals 8/8 or one page. A half a page is 4/8 of a page. And this is an estimate, but it's a time-honored element from the golden era of Hollywood, and that's what's always been used in the US. I think most other countries have adopted something like that or similar. So when you say to your location on the house, it's 32 3/8 pages. That's how your assistant director is going to break it down. That's how your script supervisor is going to note it, again, here in the US and many other countries. So you start to actually think in the terms and the vernacular that your staff is going to use when you're shooting your movie. So the other part I would say in your mini breakdown is do what's day and what's night, because that has a serious effect on a lot of logistics, turnaround issues, but also shooting nights is very difficult. If you're shooting at that house, you might want to be able to black it out so that the actors, you're shooting day for night, meaning that you're shooting during the day, but the scene takes place at night. You can also make notes of major elements here. So what we're doing is with this breakdown, which you're going to put in your logistical folder, you start to understand things in talent and travel days, locations, unique builds, etc. Okay? Now, Movie Magic is basically the most dominant software. There's Guerrilla software, there's a few others. But this is a blank breakdown page. And there's a couple of areas here. We'll look at one that's filled out. But you have this sequence and these comments. And these are good for you to use, even if you're not doing the breakdown yourself. You're having an assistant director do it, or initially a unit production manager. Well, these groupings will actually help you a great deal, because you could start to think in those terms and give direction to the assistant director. You could say, look, we're going to be at the house for 32 3/8 pages. So I'd like to group that early because of this actress. And the assistant director or the UPM will go, oh, well, you really know your material. That's pretty good. Okay. And then the store, and then the beach house. And there's another reason for that, because if you can actually shoot the house, the store, and the beach house, you have the idea of reducing transportation, because if you can sit at the house for, let's say, it could be a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is, you might be able to reduce the transportation costs, which are highly significant in the US. So those are also elements where you could start to note critical scenes and make notes. You might say there's a very important scene at the house between the husband and wife, an intimate scene, but you don't shoot that day one. You want to shoot it towards the end when they've gotten used to each other and they feel comfortable with each other and worked up to the scene with the director. So that might be one example of why you want to start crafting your ideas about the project. If it's all logistics at that point, then you're going to get uneven acting and you won't have a say in it because you weren't thinking about the schedule. So I think that's an important aspect here. So when we actually fill out the breakdown page, you can see that now we're adding here the cast and the characters. Let me just lean in here. The stunts, and you can see all these categories: cast members, picture doubles. So if we have stand-ins, if there's an intimate moment between that actor and actress at the house, they may want body doubles. You have stunts. If somebody falls in the pool or whatever happens, that's something. Stunt cars, precision drivers, extras, etc. Now, so these are all the elements and the categories that we can actually build up, all these here. And each one of those will come in, and for those who haven't seen a breakdown sheet, we have the sheet number, the scene, whether it's interior, exterior, or both, because it could go from an exterior into the house, the actual set, of course, day, night, and here's these 1/8 of pages over here. So you'll have 32, 3 7/8 pages will be this scene 8 over here. So that's something I might put in there. A synopsis, discussion, the page of the script, or the day. It's the project we're talking about takes place over a week. So day 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's very important for continuity as well as costume, unless your actors wear the exact same thing every day. So, and then here's the use of sequence and comments, location, etc. So this is the element that becomes the basic element of one scene broken down, one scene from your script broken down into its component elements. If it's not on here, it probably won't show up the day you need it. So that's the assistant director's job, and to function with the production coordinator, say, this is what we need on this day, get it approved by the UPM, etc. So this is a critical piece of information here. All right. Now, when you think of a scene, you have to think about what is on the page and off the page, and this is the tricky part. So if we have a scene with a high school with a visit by our hero, so we're beyond the house and the store and the beach house, and there's a high school there where the actor's son gets visited at his school. Well, on the page we have extras, we have teachers, students, athletics, maybe at the school might be an athletic field, etc. So there's people running track in the background, athletic gear. So that's one aspect, and that's on the page. Here's the tricky part, and this is tougher, and you kind of get more of this with experience, but the stuff that's off the page are social workers. So when you actually have students who could be 12 through, I'll say 12 through 18, something like that, because it's a high school, maybe 14 through 18, but nonetheless, you could have social workers in the United States. Then you have 200 of these people. You're going to have assistant directors, additional ones. Then you have additional lunch, restrooms, craft service, and even more lunches. I guess I wrote that twice. But anyways, then you might have second meal. So the point of this, though, is when somebody says, and I've certainly gotten this a fair amount of times where somebody goes, why is it so expensive? And you say, well, here's a scene where you have 200 extras. So there's stuff that's on the page and off the page. And that's a technique you have to look at. And that's hence you want that logistical script where you say, what's happening in the background? Yeah, we're in the shop, but in the background of the shop, maybe out the front window of the shop, you have somebody selling something, a street vendor or a passersby. So even though there's just a half a dozen people in the shop, what's happening outside? What's in your imagination, what your director is going to want? So start to think about on the page and off the page. Okay, there's a technique. Now you have a calendar. Everybody's familiar with a calendar, but the one thing here is you start to basically put together your information. You say, these are the days we're going to start shooting. We're going to work Monday through Friday. We have Saturday and Sunday off. Oh, that Monday is in the US or another country, a holiday. We can't work that day. We won't be allowed to work that day, or going to be double time if we did, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to put it in your calendar and deal with holidays. And there's a lot in the US. There's a lot more in France. And you start to look, and there's religious holidays. There's governmental holidays. So not necessarily the same in some countries. So you have to actually be culturally aware of that. Some people just say, no, we're not going to work. We're not even going to show up. So if you plan to work a day when they're not going to show up, you might be doing a lot of work yourself. So the calendar is an essential component to think about: how many weeks of shooting and where, etc. So another part of the scheduling component, and I know I'm going fast here, but I'm watching the clock, so is the days out of days. My friend, it's called, my friend, when I did the Taken series, he was French, he called it the dude, days out of days, and we started calling it the Duderino after the Big Lebowski there. So what this does, and this is a critical piece of information, is it takes that calendar that we just saw, and if we're working Monday through Friday, and this is one of the Taken ones, so you could see we're working Monday through Friday right here. And when we work Monday through Friday, you could see who's working. Start work, work drop, that's WD. Start work drop, and I know this is a little confusing right now. Start work finish, that means you start the work, you work, and you finish on the same day right here. So this actually tells on the cast which days you need these people. And the reason you want this versatility is simply because, what a shock, schedules change. All of a sudden, a location isn't available. An actor could get sick. Many factors come into play. Weather, adverse weather, and you are flipping scenes because you're trying to make the schedule work. So you can flip the schedule and then print out new days out of days, new dudes, and then you're able to actually look and see when we need it. Now, this doesn't just apply to cast, but to all these categories here. So when I flip these days on the master schedule, I will know when I need my drivers or my helicopter, picture vehicles, extras, etc. So this breakdown sheet relates to this days out of days and the calendar. This also helps you very much to be able to know the actor roles. So when you start to compress them, you're able to say right here, you're able to say, well, how many days do I need that actress for 4 weeks? You could readily look at your schedule and go, hey, that's going to work, okay? So it helps compress information into digestible bites for you to make a decision. Very good to go. Now, grouping. Okay, so grouping means that exactly what we did, we kind of covered this, and I don't want to belabor the point, but we group things in the house, the store, the beach house, etc. So this is about star availability, the emotional intensity for the actors. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead, but condensing locations. We also discussed that to some degree. And one thing else is the element in the US about transportation costs. Transpo can be very, very expensive in the US. It can be as much as 10 or 15% of your budget. So if you're able to shoot in a warehouse where your production office is and build something sometimes in the warehouse, or there's an office in there to use, you have what are called cover sets, number one, which means if it rains, you can go right into that cover set and keep shooting. So that's great. And the other part is you might have a couple sets in there so that you really don't bring on a lot of transportation right away. You might delay a week or two, and that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So one thing interesting is that I worked with Bob Rafelson on a project. He told me that he had a certain vision for doing something with fewer people on the crew, like 10 or 12 people. It was on his film Mountains of the Moon. And he wanted to go into the jungle and basically get a few shots with 8, 10 people. But everybody wanted to bring somebody. And pretty soon he'd have 40 people going into the jungle with him to get a few shots. And he also had people fight him on what he was trying to do. And he said, look, it's just a dream sequence. And then everybody on the crew went, oh, okay, go ahead. So that's one way of making people realize the psychology of what you want to do and to accomplish it in very modest means when you have a certain price you need to attain for your project to make it both profitable and to actually make it in the first place. All right. And I'm looking at 27 minutes here, folks, so I'm trying to be mindful of that. Once you have your schedule, you have these final elements here, which are, this is the kind of schedule you're going to get. These are strip boards, and this is a one-liner. So these are just vertical, and these are horizontal. I thought I was going to be able to take these off here, but I guess I'm not able to. Then I could blow them up and show you a little more. But essentially what it does is show you the scenes, and then it shows you the actors or other elements. So you can readily look right across and see who's working this particular day when it's coming up. This also allows you a technique of what if we did this or that, which is the key element for you to understand your script, to ask what if of the UPM, the line producer, the first AD, or other people on your crew. What if we did this? Will we make the movie better? What if we did that? Can we make it less expensive? What if we did that? Could we have more time, etc.? You're going to be asking a lot of those questions. So having this kind of knowledge is going to be very critical. Okay, budgeting. Here we go. 26 minutes. And so we've taken our budget project questionnaire, which you dutifully filled out. And we've also taken the elements that we have from our schedule. So we have the breakdown sheet, we have our calendar, and now we've gotten our one-liner, which is our schedule. And so we start to identify the elements, the days required, and the sequence of those. So you can see how all three of these pieces of information really start to work together to tell you about your script. So we also have our list of assumptions. And the idea is, of course, I'm reinforcing this, is make a written list of assumptions. I think the old saying is, if you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, is an old line. And I have to say, I've seen that happen more often than not. So make sure you write down your assumptions and keep trading with people that are partners, relevant crew, and others, so that you're always on the same page, literally. No one can ever say you didn't tell them, because I've seen that way too many times. Now, our budget landscape, and when we start to look at the budget, we have a number of things. to look at here. Okay. First, you have to choose your template. Now, you could have a certain financing company and they may have a preference on the template of the budget. So you want to ask them, do you have a preference? If they say no, good. Then you could probably go with the one your line producer UPM is doing. But there's nothing much worse than having to take a budget and translate it all over into a new form after you've already done the work. So ask about that. Keep everybody very happy, especially people with the money and the accountants who are giving you the money. So ask that first. That has to do with the accounting and accounts. So when we look at a budget form here, you have the above the line, for those people unfamiliar, story, screenplay, cast, travel, and living. Then what you'll do is have the below the line right here, everything from production staff to the second unit. Then you have the post, okay? Editorial, visual effects, music, etc., titles. And then you have other, which could be publicity, expense, insurance, etc. Down here is where we have completion bond, usually 2.5%, and contingency. Notably today with insurance, it's gotten precipitously high if it's even available due to the COVID pandemic. So that's a big, big issue right now. It's anticipated those could at least double or triple in the near future. So you want to be mindful of that. So there's the landscape that we're looking at. And then we go down to one category here, and we'll call this is camera. So each details the DP. These are the account numbers here. And we can see that we're basically doing that breakdown. We're accounting for everything in each of these categories. So when we go to the, I just picked this one, camera crews, we're going to have the operator, first AC, second AC, and then we actually have the prep time, the shoot, and the wrap. Now, because these are extra camera crews, they don't have any wrap really much here, at least for the operator. And then we actually have to put in the hours per week, 55 hours per week, 85 and 55. This is what is called straight time pay hours. So the short version of that, which I can explain at some other point to get more into it, but you might work 60 hours a week, 12 hours a day, times 5 days a week is 60 hours. However, because you do time and a half, time and a half, double time, 1.0, 1.5, 2.0, when you actually do the math, you have what are called straight time pay hours. That means someone is getting paid 85 straight time pay hours of $30 an hour because some of these account for time and a half and double time. That's the shortest explanation of that I can really give, but the math works out, and this allows you to build it on an hourly basis right now so that when you actually want to use globals and other elements, it works out better for those what-if questions, okay? So when we're doing the budget, you also remember you have things that are on the page and are off the page as well. One of the elements that's off the page, I would say, are fringes. Now, these are our lovely taxes for federal, social, state, in the US, federal, unemployment, state, etc. In regards to this, social taxes are critical, particularly if you're shooting in Australia, Europe, virtually every other country, but they can add 38 to 48% or more, I've even seen more, to your budget. So if you say, well, this person is going to get paid $10,000, $1,000 a week, well, it could actually be $1,380 or $1,480, etc. So you really need to make sure when you start to say, well, let's go film in this country or state or whatever, well, ask about their fringes, because in your calculation, you don't want to underestimate that. I've seen people do that and come back with some dire compromises they had to make. Now, globals is something I wanted to actually spend a little bit of time on. And in these globals, I actually, what's unfortunate, let's see, hang on a second. I'm going to see if this is a global, is an aspect of the budgeting program. And you could see that I actually can have prep days. Or in this case, let's see, I think it might be worthwhile. Let me see if I could go back out here. So, all right, I think you're able to, oh, I don't know if you're able to see me moving that. All right. Let me see. I'm actually going to move these two pieces around here and see if I can increase them in size so that you can actually see them. Okay. So I'm going back to the presentation part. Bear with me here. All right. I don't think we're getting it refreshed here. So this here is the globals. I tried to put these across here. So this is a project I was working on the right. And on the right here, it was a budget set in China. It was for, you can't see the bottom here, but it was about $148 million. So you could see the Chinese, you could see visual effects, 34 million, et cetera, et cetera. When you actually look at the globals, globals are this aspect of the budgeting system that says, how many weeks are you shooting? Shoot weeks, 5. Shoot weeks, 40. Prep weeks, in this case on the left, you'll see the UK, United Kingdom, days on prep, shoot, UK weeks total. Then you have Australia, and then here we are in China. So you have different aspects of countries. Then here's an overtime. So we actually could look at the overtime that we're dealing with. And then we have currencies. In this case, British pound sterling, US dollars, Chinese currencies, and Hong Kong dollars. So in this regard, what happens is that you're able to take a look at this and actually create various equations. So if you say, well, what if we spend 6 weeks in the UK, and then you decide, well, let's spend 5. What does that change the bottom line? So these globals can be extremely powerful in terms of you answering your what if questions. And these are kinds of questions you could build up in your logistical notebook to say, these are ones that I'm thinking of, and then start to get some answers about them. So I think that is a critical element to spend time asking what if, particularly if you have a very complicated film like this was. These globals, I think, went to about 400 of them. Some of the other films will have maybe, I don't know, 40, 50, somewhere in there, not overwhelming. But it allows you to put in shoot days or second unit days, etc. So once you're in the budgeting phase, having a good set of globals and being familiar with them to ask questions is a great utility. So, okay. Now, you're going to ask yourself, well, which rates do I want to use? And the challenge with that is you have US labor rates, Canada, you could also be in Europe, and I've got rate cards for several dozen countries, budgets or rate cards. In the US, it very much has to do with tiers and the format. And it's being a very union-oriented industry here. The tiers are really what sets it apart in terms of organization and be able to find them. For example, and I have to update these, but you have the Screen Actors Guild, and I think they just raised this limit here, the ultra low budget, modified, standard, one with incentives, full theatrical, and then the DGA rates and the IA rates. And then there's the Teamsters. So you could see if you actually did a film that was, let's just pick this, standard low budget at $2.5 million, and then I have to go to here to the DGA to get these rates, and then I go up to here for the IA. Conversely, if I get the full theatrical SAG, but it's $5.5 to $8 million here for the DGA, and then I have to go over here for the IA. So in other words, each of these 3 respective major unions, SAG, DGA, IA, have different levels. They're not lined up. So they actually, I guess, didn't talk and try and figure out how they can actually come up with some kind of uniform tier system. They all developed them on their own. What's excluded are contingencies, distribution required delivery items, etc., which brings down the tier number. So if you're making a film for 8.5, you can exclude the contingency. So you're not in this level here, you would actually be in this level. So you can actually drop a tier, and therefore it's a little cheaper. All right. So where do I get the numbers? I saw a gentleman here, Steve Bizanov here, who actually media services. Hello, Steve. They actually do a great job at media services, and they you beat me to it there, Steve, but indeed, I have media services right here, so maybe I get the last laugh. But anyways, this Showbiz Labor Guide is terrific, and they will actually, I've got a little screen grab in here somewhere. It is a great resource. It's free. You could sign up for it. Yes, free. See how you can put that up there. It is very helpful. It's one of the places I go to just make sure I'm on the mark on a number of levels, particularly in the US here. So you have these resources you can go to start to familiarize yourself with rates and tiers and area standards agreements, etc. There you go. There you go, Steve. So there's Showbiz Labor Guide right here. And when you go in, you sign up for free, and you can actually go to the respective areas you want, like the LA Crew, SAG, DGA, etc. Area standards is basically certain areas of the country that have more thrifty rates, which benefit and encourage film production in, let's say, Atlanta, Savannah, New Orleans, a number of other cities. You can also go here to the DGA, and under their contracts, you should be able to download the rate cards. So you can actually get those rate cards there so that you can actually study and see what you'll pay for DGA directors, UPMs, first ADs, etc., etc. And the Showbiz Labor Guide, here's some of the detail that you can see. It will actually say, well, here's the rate per hour for this particular position, and that's how you start to flesh out a great deal of your budget. Same here with the DGA, that you're able to do that. So one thing is a question of whether in the US or international, and I talked to a number of people at the AFM here, and you can actually go here, talk about production incentives at ep.com, home managing production incentives. It's a little cut off there, but that's because I put in my friend Alfred Hitchcock with a calculator on the slate, because it's filmmaking with a calculator, and he was very, very good at doing that. One thing important is that when you're overseas now, particularly with US costs and a lack of theatrical and a lack of revenue in that direction, so I think costs are going to have to come down. Also, there's much more production going on, digital production. And as a result, I think people in international areas have a lot of benefits because of just simply the cost per minute of producing a feature or a TV show. So I was budgeting something here in the US called Dawn's Early Light, a project of mine, for 13, but in Morocco, I can get it for about 7 million. A friend of mine works there, and so he and I went through the budget together. And to show you some part of this global rate comparison, these are from 2016, I'm going to update them. But when you have the US dollar here, and actually I've noted 16, 15, et cetera, so wherever I got the budgets. So in the US, you might be shooting $48 an hour for a first AC. It's a little higher now, I know that. But when I go to the Czech Republic, it was $23. Colombia was $12.92. So when you start to look across the board, you can see how a lot of funding could be, your project might be much cheaper to do in Bulgaria, and if it's appropriate to shoot there. And if you're in India, that's obviously significantly cheaper. And so as a result, you're able to actually go and make your project with much more economical profile. So in Spain, of course, the Euro, they shot Money Heist and Narcos in Colombia, Delhi Crime and Sacred Games, I like those, in India, and Killing Eve was shot in Romania, all of them. Even they stood in for London and London, Berlin, and another city as well. They were able to shoot all that in Romania. I think Paris, because it's known, Bucharest is known as Little Paris. So let's see. One thing I did want to point out here is that we have a number of incentives that are actually coming up that I'm examining, like Romania does have an incentive. France has an incentive. Luc Besson opened that up when he shot one of his major films there. I can't think of the name of it, but it was a $200 million epic, so that they actually opened up incentives in France. And again, if you go to the incentives here, you're able to open that up and see the most current ones. That's really the one to go to. At entertainmentpartners.com is one I use. There may be some other ones. The Media Services has one that would be great. But one way or the other, you can actually not only get the benefit of two things. You get the benefit of the currency reduction. So if you are going to shoot in Canada and you have a dollar from the US that goes to the Canadian dollar, loon, then you're able to realize some kind of benefit there just simply because of the conversion rate. The other is that you actually have lower cost per crew member. So I was examining Australia, which a camera operator in the US might be $4,800 or so, $5,200 is the number I recollect. But in Australia, just between the rates and the currency conversion, it was somewhere around $2,600. So the economic viability changes a great deal, particularly in the digital world where there's access to a great many equipment, knowledge, etc. It's really kind of expanded a great deal. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is in a lot of these cases, one thing you're going to do is deal with people. So a lot of people actually just don't cultivate the people on their crew. And I've seen that over and over and over again where producers just kind of hand off the work and they don't take an active participation in it or ask questions of people far more knowledgeable than themselves. And so I think there's a certain sense of knowledge and humility for everybody. I'm always asking questions of gaffers, costumers, and production designers, but it's kind of like I look at it like here's the producer somewhere, and you have all these people that are sitting around and very, very smart at their job, and a lot of times just network with them. And it's kind of like having your own server farm. If you put the problem out there, you can actually get a lot of answers. I spend a fair amount of time just going up and saying hello to people and not pressing them on issues, because when you get to know people, you actually get an understanding of them and how they work and how they solve issues and how they can help. I've worked on films where literally the key grip has worked on 200 films. I mean, just an extraordinary amount of experience. And so when you are actually trying to put something together, a project, and you're trying to cut some corners, asking people like this and really having them be able to problem solve with you is a key. But you can't do it unless you have some kind of intimacy with these people, at least friendship or a common understanding. So spend some time doing that, because that's really where you're going to get a lot of your answers and insights. And a lot of people have will really contribute to making a great movie, because that's really what they want to do. You just have to really reach out and do that. So let's see. I'm going to be networking, and it looks like I have about 5 minutes left. So I guess I can take a few questions here on the Q&A if I do it right and don't mess it up. I don't want to have a problem here, but I'm going to be on the 8th floor taking Q&A. Sometime in the near future, I'm also going to have 7 ways your budget could get screwed up, because these are things that people always ignore on a budget. And I have a little ebook that I'm going to come out with. And I can send you the questionnaire in Excel and PDF. And if you reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn, I'll get that to you. Those are my website right there. And I think if I hit Q&A right now, I guess I could take a few questions here in the Q&A. So, and then I will be up at the 8th floor Q&A. So I'm going to hit Q&A right now, and let's see. I've got a few questions here. Sorry, Karen. I guess I was jamming a little faster than I thought, so I guess I have a few questions here. I'm going to ask a few, answer a few here. So how about post-production costs? Well, in the post-production costs, I actually include that in your initial questionnaire. I actually had in there the post-production costs of that, where it's music, editorial, post-sound, post-lab, delivery, titles, etc. So I included that, and you could just put in estimates on that. And right now, that's one place where you can usually go get a good deal. So if you kind of shop around and get a deal, at least an early understanding, you might be able to at least feel comfortable that you made a good selection and solidify those costs for your production questionnaire. Do I do budgets for others as a service? All the time. So absolutely, you can hire me and I can do schedules and budgets and all that good stuff. Happy to do it, and I appreciate that. What makes a film a union film if you just have SAG, DGA, DGA, and IATSE? It'll be a union film if you have any SAG actor, so technically it'll be a union film right there. But obviously it's limited to the Screen Actors Guild in terms of their authority on set. You can add SAG, DGA, IA, Teamsters, depending on the levels you're working at. If your film is $500,000, you're going to be SAG, but not DGA, not IA, not Teamster. So as a result of that, you can actually have less worries in that regard. But a lot of the people you may want to hire may want to have some kind of union benefits depending on the level of your film, $1 million or $2 million. Right now, given the COVID scenario, I think that there is a sense that people aren't insuring $10 million movies, $5 million movies just because of COVID. So the challenge is that you have to make movies that are low budget where the risk is worth it, because if you have to abandon the entire movie, a $300,000, $500,000, $700,000, $1 million movie is abandoning that wouldn't be as problematic as $10 million for companies and individuals. So let's see. How many days does it take to shoot a page of a script? Well, that depends on the page. On some days, I've shot 2/8 of a page because there was a lot of stunts. And it kind of goes to the old adage of an eighth of a page was the Huns invade Rome. So that could take 3 weeks of shooting. So that becomes a different way to quantify it depending on what's actually on the page. So that's harder to say. If it's all dialogue, sometimes people can do 3 to 5 pages a day. If you're low budget, you're going to speed up the process. If you are a studio film, it might be 1.5 pages to 2 pages a day because they tend to shoot a bit slower. What if you film in Mexico? Do SAG rates and union rates still apply? Mexico's got its own unions. They mostly come out of Churubusco Studios, Mexico City, and then people work from Mexico City and travel to the rest of the country. They work 11-hour days in Mexico. If you have SAG actors, they'll want to have them, they'll be SAG for the most part. So, but then once you're in Mexico, you would use Mexican film rates, or if you travel, let's say, an American crew to Mexico, you might be using IATSE rates for that select crew, and then also sign with the Mexican union. Okay. Trying to do some reverse engineering? Well, that's good attitude. How best to learn potential earn rates from international sales to figure out how much you can realistically spend and still hope to profit. I think that's Max there asking, Wartundike asking that question. And indeed, I think reverse engineering is exactly some part of what I was trying to get here, Max. The idea is that you have to come up with that little questionnaire and reverse engineer it, and then fiddle around with that questionnaire to get the mark that you can actually get on your sales and your cost. So you're right in the thinking there about why that questionnaire exists. Where's my contact info? You could reach me at mandavilmedia@gmail.com or on Facebook or LinkedIn. I think that we're coming back now with Karen any second here, I think, as I am running out of time.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, Karen, how
Good.
are you?
So as Michael mentioned, we're going to end the Q&A portion here in this building, but if you do want to join Michael to continue the discussion, you can go back to the map and click on the networking pavilion and head to the 8th floor to the open stage 1 tables. Michael,
Thank you very much, Karen. Okay.